Hello and welcome to Wisdom 101. My name is Guadagni, and my guest today is Annam, or Elle Collier. She's the director of the HeartGate Sanctuary in Hood River, Oregon. And I'm a student of hers, and I've just had the chance to work together over a weekend. And I wanted to invite you in on some questions and answers and some dialogue between us. So thank you for seeing me today. I appreciate it. So I've been always interested in big questions. And one thing I love is to be able to talk with you about these big questions and to receive very potent and powerful answers and new ways of looking at things. I think that the mind is always looking for something to sink its teeth into, but I always appreciate the nuance and the poetic way of your delivery that brings a new connection in a new place in my heart or in my being. And so I'd love to talk with you about some of these big questions today. One big word is love, and I think this is something that we can say, I love spaghetti, or I love ice cream, I love my wife, or I love these big or these small things. But I think that there's a sense that love is something much bigger than perhaps what we can define. I'm curious, what is your perspective on love?
We have to leave the spaghetti Western form of delivery here, which normally when we're going to isolate words and try and discern what they mean, we have to come into lesser words to try it on. Love is undefined by logic, and it cannot be had by a mind saying, I am going to be a loving person now. Well, we could almost access it that way, almost, if we know that every other possibility is nothing that is going to move us properly, that love itself is going to be what motivates us. And I notice only that love works at a arrangement of the kind that motivates what literally and virtually we could call intercoursing among all of its prime ethic. Its prime ethic is the right word. I was looking to see if there was another way to say it. And ethic is anything that is, we might call it an ideal, a style of trust, something we're going to continue to trust in. And love is concentrating on whatever is to be valued and used well. It's not human. Years ago when we tried to find out how to access the meaning of love, since that is to be understood as our prime nature, it was indicated that we don't yet fully value God enough to be the ethic of God, which is love. God would be the earlier word then, probably. So, do you mind?
Please. Yes.
God is an ethic of God. It has no other. There's no mother. There's no base of delivery of God. It's just all that is full of itself and has everything to be God about. God is not a word, it's a mind-made sound, but it can be chosen as a substitute for the sound effect of thunder and the applause of thunder as it shoots out its rain of answer. So God has answer, but it can only deliver answer in a shroud of a kind that covets only having the answer full of delivery. The answer must be deliverable. And it can be deliverable only in the higher essential name of oneness. We don't know that name. We're too muted. We don't hear the sound. We're not able to gain access to the full rhythm of what is to be so and what is to be said even through us. So, I'm not speaking fully of love yet, in the effect of the wholeness in us, we are made to connect. We are made in the connection to feel where the answers are so and when they're not exact. Love manages all that. It manages so that we find our way back from individuality to more than the word unity normally says to us, to something of a higher ethic that values all and nonetheless chooses one only. God nature. I've sometimes just simplified it and called choosing the nature of one. Mm. Love shows us it coaches us in devaluing unity made by ourselves and changing about so that unity is made to cover over our lameness, move us away from thinking about something else than the good of the arrangement now. Love manages nothing of the intellect and nothing of the body yet. It manages our core. So we are of unity, and it begins to be a noble, energetic almost, but a noble remnant of oneness that can be mildly, for a long time, just mildly a touchstone for people. So they get to notice what they're about when they're that deeply owned by oneness, built by oneness, and not by the independent mind. It's a good beginning and a difficult one to answer.
Sure, of course. So would you say God, I've heard it said love and God are kind of synonymous. Would you say that's true?
They have to be synonymous here on this plane. We don't know the next way of God. We have to have love before we can go to the more of God, or to the whatever else there is of God. It is love that delivers us. Just love.
And so when there's love, let's say we have the love we feel for a child, or for the earth, or for ourself perhaps, or for another, and when we don't feel love, what is it that's happening? How do we lose love?
Well, as I said, it's not exactly known on earth. We have interest and we hope to be free of somebody else torturing us, trying to motivate us, trying to push us about, trying to possess us. But inevitably among people, especially couples and sometimes friends, sometimes children and parents, sometimes enemies, sometimes governing forces, sometimes at your job, people do it. People try to make it so that you are. And something of an agency of protection, or an agency for them to like themselves. I think we forget to just know that we come together to learn about love, but we end up finding out more about ourselves and what's lacking, or what we're not getting, lacking in us or not receiving via this other person. And we start to become quietly decided against being a full player. And we give part of ourselves to the actions part of ourselves to the connection, but we don't complete the connection. We stay individual because we don't trust. We don't know you fully enough as a protector of this ingenuous side of us, this innocent pureness in us. I don't believe many people know how to just lock their eyes and fall into that union field. Usually they decide it's about each other that they're seeing. Do you remember saying the piece about the Baha'i version of marriage?
Yeah.
That we're containers for the divine?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was very helpful for me to, my fiance and I are getting married, and in the Baha'i tradition that we're studying, they talk about the marriage is not between two people. It's two people are marrying into this divine relationship, this relationship with God or divinity. And it's much less about the personal connection, but bonding to that divine connection.
What if the people come together and vow that, but they don't know the divine connection themselves first?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't that a difficulty?
That's exactly, I think that's a very relevant problem. And I think it's an ideal. And so why is it that it's so difficult then? Because we all want to feel love and to be unconditionally loving. Why is it that we fall into, these, like you were saying, just trying to control each other in a way?
I'm pretty sure that very few people want to be unconditionally loving, by the way.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure that people want something for themselves. They want you, my dear friend, let's say his or her dear buddy, to be nice to them, be nice to him or her, be available. If I am going to be completely unconditional in my loving, I most likely wouldn't hang out with somebody as a physical constant. I would be unconditionally loving by not robbing you of your adventure and not choosing to make you go to the movie with me just because I want a buddy to be with me. My unconditional loving would to give you complete trust in yourself as long as you don't harm me.
That seems to be kind of the main difference. Is like the conditional love that perhaps we label as love is really kind of a benefit, cost benefit analysis, perhaps. How do we get to that state? Do we need to become kind of complete in ourselves before unconditional love is available?
I'm afraid so. It's a long way to figure it out via another, because we're so close to each other. We rub on the difficult spots and they often just start hurting more instead of being answered easily. People start fidgeting when they are bumped again in that same spot, and they are disinclined to like the person doing it.
And so how
this
can
would be
we...
a very good question, actually. How can we live together and have enough separation of
interests, or
perhaps of what motivates each other is another way to say it. What motivates me, what motivates him, must be valuable to first me. Then I can say to the other individual, I'm really knowing that a ride in the park right now is so good for my body, my mind, unless there's a really good reason that you think there's another valuable use of me. So
as we're in a relationship, as we're dealing with 2 points of consciousness, 2 perspectives, 2 individuals, we have to be aware of our own calling and be honest about it, perhaps, and to say, this is what I feel we need to do.
Or you need to do.
That's a good point. Okay. And I'd like to do it with you or with my friend. But respecting, I suppose, that there may be a different answer. I think that's challenging for people because we often want to be very giving, or we want to really overly consider the other person and perhaps lose that connection. I think, how do we know if this inner voice, our inner guidance is really accurate, and how can we separate when we're in a relationship, my perspective from yours?
We will never know while there is an I. We will never know. When the I is no longer what we use to evade wholeness, there is self-unveiling at a larger meaning of self that doesn't distance itself from any situation. Nonetheless, no situation governs it. What governs it is the ethic of one. And one motivates me and the individual to work together on riddles. Endless riddles.
And how, if that oneness consciousness is, I suppose, a possibility available to everybody, how can we better tap into it? How can we adopt that oneness perspective more often?
I like to change it about and say, know where the oneness nature resides, even while having an animal form that is individual and individualizing, and never leave it, never leave the oneness. It's like a factory of constant input, then it comes through the veiled awareness here via a kind of a sensitive alignment to that. Even the future can be sensed, so we know when not to go out tonight. And then there's something of a hurricane that starts up all of a sudden. We just knew not to go and burn that light too long, because another day we needed to have one light left that could stay longer. And there's a sensitivity to what now is about. And as we might call it in our time way of speaking, later on we find out the proof is out there somewhere as to how this was working accurately for all. Now, back to couples. That might be a very good place to stay.
Yeah.
Because it's even more difficult with coupling than with friends.
Right.
To maintain a standard of liking the person you're with. Real affinity. In spite of the few grudges or many ways you seem to have to discipline your preferences to get along well. The affinity is going to matter. That's more the stage we call the interest stage. To stay interested is vital. Love is at the 9th stage.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. It's what covers all in equanimity of resistance toward the animal instincts as the governor, resistance toward the animal meaning of I matter, I'm not so sure about you, resistance, there's a few more, of the kind that says my nation above all, resistance to saying my neighbor is not me, and resistance to saying my clan I fight for, not your clan. And it manages us so that we finally find that adventure of love as the primary force that dwells in us to establish us accurately when in bed together, when in causing a child together, when in dropping in on a cousin and noticing that that person needs us, somebody to be there, and lets us know, doesn't matter if you're married, I need something to be here a week, and one goes to be there a week. Noticing. And difficulties are not hard when you're in a state of love.
So that ninth stage of love that you're talking about, it sounds like it's kind of that dissolving of the ego, the I, that sees itself as, like you're saying, more important than others or different than others. So if there's this state of unconditional love, I suppose, at that point, what is then the process to reach that, if this is a process that can be followed?
We could go through the stages. The stages of awareness, receiving and retrieving the unity of alignment energy that and lets the mind enter God finally, and lets the version of you that is a human simply be a body, like a nerve is a body that carries signals properly. The stages are very intriguingly hard to do here, and so the most relevant one we've spoken of already, not here on this recording, but it's nothing simple to say you must make it so that you and everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever achieved, everything you've ever wanted, every insight you've ever had as to your character, every insight you've ever had as to me or him or them, needs to go free from belonging to you. And as I started, I'll say again, that includes you going free from belonging to you, or belonging to her, or belonging to your father and mother, or to your clan, or to your planet. Going free is the first great stage, and it's a freeing up of the now. So now presides here. If we do it in a vaster way than we even have memory to know about, we're free. All the stages travel together. It's just, we are one with that which is.
That seems very challenging for the human mind, obviously.
Yes.
You know.
We can start with very simple words.
Yeah.
Give it over to a better answer than just dropping it back in here. Whatever is happening, whatever you're seeing, whoever you're with, give it over to an unconditioned by you access level. Give it over to a higher power, but I'd say a higher state of interest.
Yeah.
A devilish no more interest in a certain outcome, more cherubim quality of, I could use greater insight here. And that takes us immediately through from trying to control an event to interest in what to do. This is really charming when we're together. What can I do to promote the best possibility here and now?
Because it seems like these identities, you know, like I belong to this nation or this ethnic class or, you know, a college or whatever people kind of identify with, it gives them some sense of perhaps, you know, power and belonging. But it sounds like you're saying not just give that up, but find something better and you naturally perhaps will release that. Is that Is that accurate?
I like that. Right, it's not a precise, here's my badge, or here's my citizenship.
Right.
But there's no barriers to studying another viewpoint, another religious awareness, another cultural or racial quality of how to solve quandaries in their life.
It seems like we would be best equipped, to deal with these complex challenges if we can reach that stage of, and what it sounds like many great teachers have achieved, that sense of non-identifying with even their human form and really embodying their divine self, and therefore seeing neighbors as yourself, seeing your enemy as your friend. And again, it seems very hard to let go of those perhaps crutches that we use in belonging and wanting to belong. How can we invite something better? Because I think it's hard to let go of something, but perhaps if we are finding something better, we'll naturally let it go. What should we be looking for? How can we interact and relate with something better than these senses of belonging?
I'm going to stay on that word interest, to be very interested. I can really like talking with you and getting your viewpoint on things, and that will keep me from hating our differences or worrying too long about your style. You have black hair and I have almost white hair now, or just you're young and I'm older. And none of that matters as long as I'm very interested. Then it's a viability between us. So interest sort of patches us in more completely to our possibilities.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's very relevant, like you were saying, with couples, because I think it's very easy after a year or 10 years, you can feel like you're losing interest. How can we cultivate interest in another person, especially a partner, to kindle that love?
You will never fully know yourself. You definitely will never know the other person. So there's lots of capacity to honor that fact and say, "Oh, another viewpoint. I see you're starving, I'm full. It's dinner time." It seems to happen to us a lot. So maybe we'll just have to turn it all about and find another way that we will have our interactions. It's possibly not needed at the normal dinner time, for instance. And just as you stay unguarded in your discoveries, you can say, "I just figured something out that I never knew about us." I'm not sure how to borrow from this, because I can already tell as we're talking that there are many ways to play into this, but it's all discovery. There is no time when you will know everything, as long as you have given freedom enough for the individual you're with to be free to discover what motivates, what is good, what is right channeling of her forces when around you. At some point, there'll be a sense that, like owning an instrument, you keep discovering new ways of operating together. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
It gets better. Michael and I have been together for 26 years, and every time we resume, if we've kind of gone into a strange little difference, tandem, but not precise way of hanging out together. We resume that fascination with what causes that, or this is not exact to actually word it this way, but as long as I turn around and discern what he needs and the way I may have harmed his particular value set, I learn something and I become more light, more unoppositional in my frequency.
Yeah, I like that. And so when there's a conflict, a stress in the relationship,
that's what we need to go to.
You know, even a rupture, perhaps, a breaking of
and
trust.
There will be.
And there will be. How do we go about to repair these things in couples, in relationships?
You know, this is not a fast answer.
Right.
If it were, we would have figured this out and gotten over this step. It seems like it's a primitive thing that we all have. And we almost want to have conflict.
Interesting.
You know, we want to agree with ourselves and not you. And we want to prove that we're right by just rubbing you wrong to see what happens, or to yell at the guy going by and flip him some nasty little signal and just see what he does. Just cause a tirade. So maybe we need to find out why we want conflict. What are we getting out of it? We must want something, or it wouldn't be there.
Right.
Well, we want our individuality, and we want to be respected for it. And we don't get a lot of respect. We're basically shined on. People pretend to respect us, but they're all about themselves. And so we are already feeling less love here and more individual wants, more individual, trying to look in the mirror and see how they feel about themselves today. So it's a lot of lonely people hungry for the certainty of getting along, who don't find that that's as valuable to others at the moment you want, or she wants that. And so there's a kind of a stiffening of trust in solutions evolving accurately. And most people jump to a conclusion way ahead of the reason to. And they decide there's a conflict. We decide that person's an enemy who just barked at me as he went by and flipped the bird.
It seems like even the proximity, like you're saying, this sense of, like, the further we get from each other, the easier it is to be aggressive. You know, it's like,
well, there's that.
If we're in our car, you know, it's so much easier to yell at somebody, but then you get out of the car and you're probably not going to, you know, actually be the same person anymore. Or the internet, you know, people will write the most hateful things from behind the safety of their computer screen. Yet in the supermarket, they would never say something like that.
They stuff it. The undigested animosities.
And so is it that proximity, is it coming closer together that lets us see, oh gosh, maybe what I'm feeling, my anger toward you, isn't it what I thought it was, perhaps? Is that helpful to come in closer proximity to each other? Or what strategies?
It's helpful to be interested. I'm going to keep on this interest theme. That's really a treasure. To be very interested. Why you're so upset at me? I may be extremely uncomfortable listening to why it is and go, ooh, I kind of get that. See why you think that. But it will heal us if I stay interested. So learning the value of real interest and petting the situation over it's like trying to calm an animal that's been very shy because it's been abused. We've all been abused. Not always was the abuse meant, but in some way we've all known. that we can't demand kindness and expect it always. So we have to heal from a long, 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 long path being a human. And there's nothing to do but realize it's a long path still to generating a modesty enough to retrieving the information we need to bolster our courage and know that we're not the same viewpoint right now. That's part of the creed we probably need to get back to. I value something in a distinctively unique way in this moment. You value something in a very specific way to you this moment, and we're probably going to be able to figure out how to nest them well and hatch them both, but we're not the same egg. Exactly.
I like that. That's a great analogy.
I'll pop out at one time and other another. One will be a little weaker for a moment, the other a little more aggressive and try to throw the brother out of the nest. And you have to deal with it from interest,
right,
and realization that this is a bigger one. You are a vaster array of know-how when you are realizing the kindredness of all. That somehow we are kindred natures, not just humans, but mainly, for now, we'll say humans have kindred nature. So we can be kind, and the kindness comes together with interest.
I like that a lot. I like that word because interest kind of blends attention, paying attention to someone, at the same time having an open mind, and also kind of having perhaps even a slight benevolence. Maybe mindfulness is another synonym. Being nice. Mindful, being interested.
Yeah.
And I think, meditation talks about that, just kind of being interested in what am I thinking about? Or in this case, I think as an activity, being actively interested in my partner or in this person on the street who's just cut me off, or this person who has declared war on me.
Yes. What's it going to lead to? Vaster intrigue with the riddle, not feeling like a victim of the circumstance anymore. It's a riddle. I said that earlier. We are intended constantly to enter the riddle, knowing that we're here as its answer somehow. That's extraordinary.
We are here as the answer to the riddle?
Yes.
Wow, I like that. And so this self-inquiry, this self...
part of it.
Yeah. So as we unravel the riddle of knowing who we are and why we're here and what we're doing, perhaps we'll gain insight as well in this greater riddle.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this around totally. When I totally love wholeness as the self before myself as a body, I may have the eyes, the great knowing I, to welcome us as a treasure. I need to have wholeness. I cannot find myself. So it is even said biblically in a different way. Love God. That's the first. Love the wholeness of is. I-S. It's like, this is not Oz. This is is. Like the welcoming offering of what is for your wholeness to exceed the limits of the personal viewpoint and the personal interests. And then your nature manifests like an arm manifests from holism to reach down and take hold of something, but there's no arm separating out to do so.
So, as individuals, are we extensions of God, of this oneness?
Yes, no, yes. Of that, within that, held in the spell that love is. Spell is one of my recognized words now as having a huge meaning. Everything is a riddle. I'll come back to that. And is spellbound to achieve the miraculous advent of wholeness, or sometimes we can call it the sacred, manifesting only sacred good. There's no actual way to say this, but we are converts from that. We've been converted toward an ego valuing itself, chasing after its own tail, as many have said, and it's rather nice to consider it's from that. And we don't ever find ourselves, because there's no one here to find. That is a truth that we won't have a lot of way to see to until we become a vaster celebrant of wholeness. A celebrant of... Now, I don't mean wholeness of I have eyes that see out the window and I can collect in all the data of trees and sky and all the energies here, but wholeness that supersedes considering things as time or as an event. Wholeness that is unlimitable by our mind, and wholeness that doesn't achieve anything other than act of good. There's nothing here that makes sense until we realize wholeness has fed us with itself, and we are still preferring a lemon drop for the swift feeling of belonging to something. I'll try it another way. We still want to separate in order to have an event. We still are looking to be individual and not wholeness. But every time we try to be an individual, we make mistakes and we have conflict. And because we like being an individual, we will prefer to choose conflict, and we will prefer to hate, and we will activate that if there's any reason that seems to be making me or making you feel like you're not good enough. So I mentioned that we're in a spell. We're in a spell of our own making right now. Like staying in a dream. I think that is another very good reality, that we are just dreaming ourselves here. And we're not precisely in holism. We're spinning around like dust, migrating into some reactivity within its own confine, and we have made a word spell that says, let me stay here as long as I can. And then we forgot holism. We don't use it enough to work the riddle. So we're caught separating from being an answer, and the only thing the riddle does is make us fidgety and a sense of being incomplete and the sense of needing to find ourselves. But that's that little piece, that little riddle of search is really to find whole, resonant light nature.
Wow.
It probably would be simpler if we just studied physics for a while. I actually heard this. I'm a listener. So I listen in and the word comes through. And I find it's actually awkward to say it like that, like there's I and another. But that part of us that answers came in and indicated that science is starting toward proving God. It will get there, was the statement. It will actuate reality as it is. We're not there yet. It was just kind of this statement of we're still biased about individual parts and being able to control them.
Right. Control is interesting because the scientific method depends on control. And the only way to have an experiment through science is if you have controls, yet there are so many things that we cannot control. For instance, quantum physics, I think, is kind of blending with spirituality. And quantum physics presumes that the consciousness of an observer actually affects an experiment.
Yes.
And so how do we control an experiment when our own consciousness is affecting it?
Exactly.
So
that's what's limiting us. That's why we cannot prove God yet. Because you have to observe how things are from a great enough distance to lend a way for what is moving in accord with the sympathies of the greatest good to actually have that happen. But the moment we come in, like if you come in too close to me, you actually stop at my head, you affect the way I can speak.
Interesting. Yeah.
We affect each other because we come up against as if substance. It's not just that waves are the end result of coming back to wholeness, but waves will support an empathic reassociation with oneness frequency instead of limited frequency exchanges that just batter at these seeming enemies or these seeming othernesses.
And so is love that oneness? Is it that wholeness? And when we, I think, achieve that state, perhaps briefly for many of us, are we then instructed by this oneness, by God? Is it something coming through us?
Oh, yes. That one I can attest easily. Oh, yes.
What can we do to allow that state or to encourage it more often? And I know you talked about interest, and I think you've already answered that to a degree, but...
So try this one.
Yeah.
Love me as you love you. What does that mean?
That helps to dissolve the sense of self.
Yeah. Because you honestly don't know how to love you. You don't really know how to love me. So we have to go to something bigger, better than the form we're in order to value this connectivity that love is. If we value connectivity, we are already in a state of rapport.
Oh. Thank you so much for your words today. This has been really wonderful. I appreciate it.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you all for joining us. And this has been Wisdom 101 interview with Annam. She's the director of the HeartGate Center and Sanctuary in Hood River, Oregon. And we'll have more information that you can get in touch with Annam, and perhaps you can have a chance to meet her in person or come to one of her sessions. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.